Katie McDermott, Professor of Public Policy and Education and Co-Associate Director of the Center for Education Policy here in the College of Education at UMass Amherst. My job today is to welcome you to the Center for Education Policy's third annual Civic Summit. Thank you for being here, and please make sure you stay through the end to enjoy some refreshments. And if you haven't done your thing with the QR code and you didn't already pre-register, please make sure you get to that. The mission of our Center for Education Policy is to strengthen PK-12 schooling and higher education through democratic decision-making and use of evidence. In keeping with that mission, we annually organize civic summits around policy issues of pressing concern. We bring together teachers, practitioners, scholars, and citizens at these civic summits, which seek to cultivate cooperation and counteract polarization. Events like this don't organize themselves, and we owe a big thank you to many people here in the College of Education. My fellow Associate Director, Rebecca Woodland, who is here somewhere, there she is. Dean Greg Kelly, Joy Jarm, our long-suffering department administrator, who is amazing. Julie Pallant, who turned on the microphones and did all kinds of other wonderful tech stuff. Jim Smith and Robin Williams, and we particularly want to recognize Richard Allen, whose generous financial support makes the Civic Summits possible. That's a lot of consonants. Richard, can you stand so that we can all properly thank you or wave, whatever you do? And with that, I will hand you over to the Director of the Center for Education Policy, Jack Schneider, who will run the event.
All right, let's do this. I mean, this is going to be your sharing life. I'm wearing life because I'm fancy. Okay, so here's what we're going to do, folks. I've given our panelists a heads up about the format, and we're going to try to do something really interactive today, because often what we do in these civic summits is we try to figure out where are members of the public on a particular issue prior to having the chance to just sit and think about it and hear from experts, talk with each other. And by experts, I of course mean my colleagues, but also people who are working in the field. Students themselves are always a part of what we do, bringing their own expertise. So what do people think before they have that chance? And what do people think afterwards, after they've had an opportunity to sit, to reflect, to think, to ask questions, to listen to folks? And this year we wanted to do it on AI and K-12 education. And our question was, what are we going to get out of it by having people tell us what their views are ahead of time and have them tell us what their views are afterwards? And it didn't seem as pressing as, for instance, when we wanted to know, like, how are people going to vote on this particular ballot question? And that what we really want is for members of the public, right, so for everybody who's here, to help us figure out where are the bright lines that we want to draw, where we say, actually, this is a use of AI in K-12 education that makes us collectively feel uneasy. And these are uses that make us feel actually like there's some real promise to pursue those. So our hope is actually to come away from this having learned from all of you, hence my perhaps overbearing urging of you to come forward so that we can really feel like we're in this together, because my hope is that you are tonight. So what we're going to do next, and I'm going to introduce these folks who are coming and sharing their expertise with us, is we're going to go through 3 different scenarios, and these scenarios were put together by our incredible undergraduate assistant Salma, who is here with us right now. And we're going to go through these scenarios, and we're all going to think about them together. And after those scenarios, our panelists are just going to offer some reflections to help us all think through them. And then we're going to do a Q&A at the end. And then finally, at the end of the event, and this is where we're going to really learn from you, we'll have an exit poll, which we'll put a QR code up for, so we can get your thoughts at the end. What are the things that you're now thinking about after you've had a chance to listen to people, talk to your neighbors, to reflect Let me introduce our panelists here. And I'll, even though I did not order them in order to sat, I'll figure this out. So sitting directly to my right, so to your left of me, is Jeff Riley. So Jeff is the co-founder and executive director of Day of AI, which is a nonprofit that is spun out of MIT to train teachers and leaders in the burgeoning artificial intelligence space. Before assuming this role, he served as the Massachusetts Commissioner of Elementary and Secondary Education for more than 6 years. His previous experience spanned urban and suburban districts, including teaching in Baltimore, Maryland, serving as principal at Kingsborough Middle School, and as superintendent and receiver of Lawrence Public Schools. So please join me in welcoming Jeff Riley. To Jeff's right is April Camuso, who is the principal of Hopkins Academy. As a former English teacher, she's grown from emphatically resisting the use of generative AI to try and solve the problem of language as a tool to improve rather than replace student thinking and prepare our students for the global world they live in. Currently, April is leading a team at Hopkins to design an AI literacy competency to be implemented in fall of 2026. He is also a graduate student here at UMass College of Education. Sarim Chaudhry is both a high school student and a GCC student through the dual enrollment program. His interests are biology, specifically human health and physiology. Welcome. We've got Tasheira Gary, who is a third grade teacher and her sixth year of teaching. She's interested in exploring how AI can be effectively utilized in the classroom to support both teachers and students, and will be starting as a doctoral student here at UMass next year. We've got Mazur, who is the director of the Center for Emerging Educational Practices and senior research and evaluation scientist at the Collaborative for Educational Services in Northampton. She's the author of the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education's AI literacy resources for educators and works with teachers and education leaders across the Commonwealth on AI literacy, AI uses in classrooms, and AI policy. And I'm tempted to say mean things about my friend Torrey Trust. Last book.
That's why I sat on this side.
But we are so honored to have one of the nation's great experts on our faculty. Torrey Trust is professor of learning and technology here in the College of Education. Her work focuses on the intersection of teaching, learning, and technology, with particular attention to how educators leverage digital tools, open educational resources, and emerging technologies, including generative AI, to support instructional design and classroom practice. She is the author of 10 academic books, including her most recent publication, AI and Civic Engagement. Okay, so let's dive into some scenarios. So, scenario number one. Katie, a 7th grade student, doesn't think she's good at math and is trying to improve her class average. After completing her daily math homework, she checks her answers with ChatGPT and asks the tool to explain why she got an answer wrong. Sometimes she gets nervous about asking her teacher questions in class, or her teacher doesn't have enough time to address her question. She feeds ChatGPT unasked questions. Katie's mom has observed her use of the tool and feels conflicted. And so now, we want you to just take a minute and talk to your neighbor if you're comfortable with that, but talk to yourself if you would like to be. And consider, is this a use of AI that should be discouraged? Like, this is a stop sign. Is this a use of AI that needs guardrails? Or is this a use of AI that should actually be encouraged? So take a minute, think about it yourselves. Chat with your neighbor if you like. We're going to have these good folks coming up with their own answer with one post on the wall. We're going to keep it moving right now, and I'm going to tell you that the panelists report, they wanted me to come up with a new color that is halfway the edge. I guess it would be color. It shows my I can hold my baby microphone.
Yes.
All right. So they chose yellow for this, even though they wanted to be halfway between yellow and green, but we forced them, and so that's what they came up with this for this first one. Now, just a show of hands or fingers rather. Were people primarily 1, should be discouraged, 2, needs guardrails, or 3? Where were you? Whoa, lots of 2. We almost came to consensus on this one. Some 3s, mostly 2s. Okay, all right, amazing. So we're gonna go to our next scenario here, and then don't worry, we're gonna have a chance to talk about all this stuff. Scenario 2. Gabriel's class is capping off a unit about 18th century America by writing research papers. The semester is about to end, and the class is short on time. To speed up the process, Gabriel's teacher has told students to use AI to brainstorm essay topics. Gabriel is hesitant to do this. He's written many essays without AI in the past and wants to come up with his own topic. He feels a little uncomfortable using it as part of the writing process. Okay, what do you think? Should be discouraged, needs guardrails, or should be encouraged? Take a couple minutes and think. That sounds like a really good conversation, but I'm going to ask everybody to show me 1, 2, or 3. Should be discouraged, needs guardrails, or should be encouraged. Whoa, lots of 1s and a few 2s. Those regular panelists came up with. Let's see, up on the wall. Before I do that, I'm going to move us to scenario.
Jack, can you just clarify that the number on the red card there
Is
is
the question number.
question number 2, okay?
Yeah, sorry, yes. So question number 1, they came up with yellow. Question number 2, they came up with red, and that's gonna go up there in 1 second. So I'm gonna take you to scenario 3. Ms. Peterson is a 5th grade teacher who started teaching 2 years ago. Another teacher at her school recommended she use Magic School AI to generate a rubric for a project she assigned her students. Their school hasn't given explicit guidance on teacher AI use. After reading positive reviews, Ms. Pearson determines that Magic School is a safe bet. She struggles with work-life balance, so any tool that can save her time is worth trying. She likes the rubric the tool generated and continues to use it to create quizzes, generate report card comments, and is considering whether to use the tool to generate fast, individualized essay feedback. Okay. Should be discouraged, needs guardrails, or should be encouraged? Okay, let's check in our audience and see 1, 2, 3. Should we discourage these guardrails or should we encourage? Ones and twos and so many ones and twos and 1, 3. One person says encourage ones. Well, you came up with pretty much the exact thing, made me come up with a new category. So that is, of course, even though it says 3, that is a 1 and a 2 rating. So in question 1, they said needs guardrails. In question 2, they said should be discouraged. In question 3, they were almost evenly split. It looks like yellow had a slight advantage there. Maybe that's just my holding. Okay, so now let's figure out why this is where the majority of folks who are here with us are on these scenarios. What is it about these scenarios that's making us uneasy, makes us feel that we need some guardrails, or makes us feel that we need to have some clear guidance in place to discourage particular kinds of action? We're going to turn it over to our panelists for the next, 30 minutes or so to hear their reflections about pretty much whatever they want to talk about, because they're the experts here on what they felt uneasy about, what they felt was possibly promising here and worth pursuing, how they see it from where they're sitting, whether it's as a student in the classroom, or as a leader inside a school, or as an expert who is advising schools. So we're going to turn it over to you all, and then we're going to leave plenty of time for you to ask your questions and make your comments and share your insights. And of course, at the very end, we'll all head out into the hall and have a chance to eat something. So let me turn this over to our experts here. We've got one working microphone that we're going to have to share. Yeah, the other one is invisible. It probably works, but it's so here, let me take this off. I'm gonna put my colleague on the spot and say, Jordan, you're up to tell us how to think about this stuff.
It's okay, I got outvoted by everyone on nearly everything.
Yeah, I'll just walk through the scenarios really quickly in my thoughts, and I think it'll be interesting because we just had such diversity of opinions, and I think that's the overarching theme here is that these tools are way more complex than this is good, this is bad, and it's really context specific. And I think it really dives into understanding like when, how, why these tools are being used, by whom, who do they affect in using them, and how do you make those decisions around what should be allowed, what shouldn't be allowed. Scenario one, look at the 7th grade student using ChatGPT. The first thing that came to mind after I asked the group how old 7th graders are, which is 12, is a violation of the privacy policy. ChatGPT, you have to be 13 and older, or else you violate the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act. And a lot of parents don't realize that when their kids are on these tools. I would encourage that student to use whatever institution supported AI she has with their school because they're going to have a license to protect her privacy. There's a lot fully against kind of the use of AI in this way, but there was a big research study that came out that actually having 24/7 access to generative AI technologies can reduce math anxiety because students don't have access to their teachers outside of school. And if they don't have a family member or friend or parent or guardian who can walk them through a math problem, they're on their own, they may search the internet, and actually generative AI technologies can help explain how to walk through and solve problems. Many students, many college students I talk to are already using them in this way. So I definitely see like the benefits of using a safe and appropriate tool in that way. I do also want to give the caveat of, and this one's hard to say, is when some students start using these tools for homework, they spiral into the AI psychosis and can lead to very serious and dire consequences with being manipulated by these tools the longer they spend on these tools. So yeah, I agree. We're kind of like in the area that we were like stuck on here was the term guardrails, right? Because it was more just like we would encourage this, but it needs a lot more talking through from the parent and teacher of when, how, why to use these tools. Scenario two, I think I was the only one that was like, yeah, let's do this because and this is Gabriel being told to use AI to brainstorm when we run out of time because I have a couple of students in the audience, they might have realized a couple times, I'm like, please just go to ChatGPT to brainstorm. That's not actually the focus of this class. This class is going to do this, and in order to do this, we need you to come up with your topic first. And I literally had a 90-minute class where students are designing global collaboration projects, and had one group that somehow I didn't catch after about 60 minutes had not picked their topic. And so they only had 30 minutes to build their entire website and do all the things they needed to do. Everyone else took like 5 minutes and had a much longer time. So in future years, I say if you're stuck, just go to AI for brainstorming because honestly, one of the things AI can do better than humans, I hate to say it, is come up with ideas because it's been trained on the entirety of English written text posted on the internet, which is more than any single human can hold in their head. So it is able to generate more ideas faster. It can also lead to homogeneity of ideas, right? So less diversity of ideas if you're always going to these tools. The last one, I was actually fine with all the way until I got to generating report card comments, right? So for creating a rubric, I do that. Sorry, students. It helps me write my rubrics. It comes up with new ideas for teaching that I haven't thought about, and does so in a way that helps me kind of be more productive in my work. But I think when it comes to using AI in a way that really replaces the role of the teacher and their relationship with the student, and so that's writing report card comments, and that's generating individualized essay feedback, that's where I find it super problematic. And I was actually presenting at, I think it was Greeley High School in New Hampshire. They have AI guidelines for teachers, not just for students. And there's really interesting to read, and one of them was you are not allowed to use AI to do any work that would replace the work of a teacher. And in this case, and it was mentioned like writing report card comments or doing essay feedback. It's more to just like speed things up. So I thought that was a super interesting and well thought out guideline. So that's, then you have to think about biases, right? These tools are extremely biased. So there's always going to be biases in grading and a lot of problems around that. And so that's just where I'm like, I drew the line there. I'm like, just no, there needs to be a lot more guidance for this teacher using Magic School than simply like, this seems cool, just use this feature and this feature and this feature and keep using more and more because I trust it because my school recommended it. And that's where we get into problems when teachers trust these tools too much.
Thanks, Tori.
Okay.
This isn't
Torrey, I have a quick question. At Greeley High School, you may not know the answer, but have they purchased any curriculum that comes with adaptive tutors? Most of the schools that I work with have. And I'll tell you the reason I ask. So when I look at these scenarios, I too, and I co-sign everything that Torrey said, but it's hard to slot these into neat categories of acceptable use or not acceptable use. And let me give you the lens that I think about this with. So, as Jack said, I was a doc student here many moons ago in the EPRA department. And so I learned, and very intimately, that there are 3 relationships that define classroom learning. We call it the instructional core: the teacher's relationship to the content, the teacher's relationship to the student, and the student's relationship to the content. And there's task in the middle and all of that stuff. And so AI is automation technology. And so every time I think about a scenario, I think about what relationship is AI intervening in here, and within that relationship, what is being automated. So in the first scenario, this is Katie who is turning to ChatGPT. So she has a relationship with that math content that is now being mediated by the AI in some way. It could be a good way. It could be a not a good way. She could be spiraling into psychosis. We don't know. But that's the question that we would have to ask. We need to know a lot more about what's happening within that relationship before we make a decision, I think, about good or bad. And similar with the rest of these. Gabriel, what is automated when we ask, or what is the cognitive work of brainstorming that is being automated in Gabriel's case? It's an interesting question. Is it important in that case? Or is it not important in that case for Gabriel's relationship to the content to happen through that cognitive work of brainstorming? Or can we offload some of that to the technology? It's going to depend. And, well, Miss Peterson. So I don't blame Miss Peterson for this. But in this case, the teacher's relationship to the content is being automated in some way by the AI. And in many cases, that is likely fine. Maybe she's using Magic School to make a rubric, and if she is following every single AI literacy framework that has been published, she's paying a lot of attention, centering her own judgment, and not losing anything in that process of automation. Or she could be. When we get to the question of her writing comments, automating the work of perhaps thinking about a student's performance and giving that student feedback, it's intervening fairly directly in that student-teacher relationship in ways that we might think that the automation of parts of that relationship could be a worry. But again, it all depends. But those are the 2 questions that I always ask about these. Which core relationship is at stake here, and it's usually more than one, and they all affect each other. And within that, what is being automated?
When I was looking at these scenarios, I was really thinking about it from my perspective working in the classroom now, and I think with each scenario, there are many pros and cons. When I'm thinking about Katie's scenario, I think that there could be guardrails put in place. Maybe the teacher could make a chatbot where it's where the student can ask questions and the chatbot gives feedback without revealing the answer right away, but asking inquiring questions and giving feedback to that student rather than just spitting out an answer. I think that it's a slippery slope. I think students can take it too far where it starts off as asking questions to help with homework, then it turns into just copying and getting answers from homework, which I've had happen in the past with students. I also think we don't know the background of the student and if they've been educated on the appropriate uses of AI. So does the student know how to use this program and are they being able to use it effectively? But the second scenario, I was really feeling neutral about it. I think that it's not necessary maybe, but there are, and we've talked about it, but there are ways where it can be a positive, where it can save students time and lend them more time for critical thinking. And then the last scenario I related to a lot because my school, we don't have guardrails right now really with AI. It's being encouraged, but there's no clear policy. And so when I was thinking about the scenario, I have used AI to make quizzes or a rubric, but then my automatic pause with that was it shouldn't be used for report cards or anything that's personalized, because I think that's the teacher's job. And I think that student data is at risk when we're feeding a lot of information about the student's behavior. Like, I think about my report card comments, I'm talking about behavior, I'm talking about academic progress. That's a lot of information to be feeding these programs, and we don't really know what's happening with that data. So I think that it's really up to the school or the district to implement policies and teach teachers what's appropriate use of AI, just like we need to do with students.
Yeah, so I'm coming at this from a student's perspective, and I'm thinking about it more so on the efficiency perspective, because I'm the student here. I don't think about as much the privacy detail. I'm not saying it's not an issue, I just from my perspective I don't think about it as much. So for example, in scenario 1, that was the one where she was trying to get the math taught to her by the AI. The thing I see from that is that I've tried to use AI to teach me certain concepts. The issue is that it doesn't know what you know, and sometimes it just doesn't know what types of questions you're asking. You know what I mean? It can only see what you've written, it doesn't know what curriculum, and you can try to feed as much of the curriculum as you want into it, but it won't be able to capture the understanding that you need. It took me like 3 hours to research a question, and it was answered in 10 minutes by a teacher. From scenario 2, that was the most glaring issue for me, was the complete replacement of the idea-making portion of it. In my opinion, especially when it comes to essays, the idea-making process is the most important process, because in order to make ideas, you have to recognize patterns, which that extends not only from coming up with ideas, but to other parts of life in general. So I think it increases cognitive thinking a lot. And in that way, replacing it is replacing that human thought. So that was the one that I had the biggest issue with, because I don't think it really aids anyone. It does kind of get rid of that time aspect of it, but just in that scenario, I think I'd rather have a student, or in my opinion, I think I'd rather have myself come up with just the idea, even if it took me 60 minutes, even if it took me over an hour to come up with the idea. When it comes to scenario 3, this one, I read through most of it, and I didn't have an issue with it until I got to the quizzes part, because I had tried to have AI make quizzes for myself. I tried to load a study guide into it. That was one of my primary ways of studying, but in the lower levels, it might work. I don't have experience with lower levels, but once you get to these higher levels, questions aren't just recall. They are advancement. They want you to apply these ideas in ways that AI just can't test you on. College Board, although I have mixed feelings on the questions, they do a really good job of testing your understanding by applying it in different scenarios, right? The questions that AI provides can't do that, so it's not a proper assessment method. And then when it comes to rubrics, similar situation where it just, actually I don't have personal experience with rubrics, obviously, but in the same way, it can't assess what the teacher wants to assess perfectly. So yeah, that's my general thoughts on AI.
So I think for me, I thought a lot about tools and goals for all 3 of those questions. Our district has spent a lot of time looking at what tools are safe, what tools are focusing on, I guess, what we see as the right thing in terms of helping both teachers and students to improve their work and not replace their work. And so with the math one, I don't necessarily have a problem with a student asking a math question in general. I don't like ChatGPT for the earlier stated reasons, right? It doesn't have the safety guardrails. We don't encourage our students to use ChatGPT. And we've talked a lot about which large language models are appropriate and which ones they might be able to use that we might encourage in the future. And we do have access to Khan Academy and Khan Writing Coach and the Khan Learning Paths, and we feel comfortable with that as a tool. And so that's an example of something that we've gone through the process and asked ourselves, is this, using student data appropriately, and is it making sure that the student understands that it's not its best friend? So if you're in the copywriting coach, it's like, I can't answer you, or I'm not a person, I don't like pizza, and it just keeps reaffirming that it's just an AI tool. So we've spent time on that. I also agree, I don't think you said it just now, Sarim, but Sarim said earlier that large language models aren't great at math. That has been my experience in talking to our math department chair. I've tried to go over different examples and find a large language model that makes him happy and that might be in any way useful for the math department. And so far that has not gone over well. It generally has an error or just really isn't hitting the mark in the way that we need it to. So I think that particular topic, though lower level in 7th grade, I think is still a sort of challenging concept when we're thinking about what we're using AI for. I also think in terms of, I'm just gonna talk again about tools for the last one, we again looked at using a program for our teachers to help them create some materials. As a former teacher, I'm gonna point out that many of us used to go into Google and say like, find me discussion questions for Romeo and Juliet. Or some people use Teacher Pay Teachers, or Google some kind of rubric on the internet that already exists, and then you would take it and you would edit it. And so if you're using some of these other tools, I haven't used Magic School, that's not what we use, you're doing a similar thing, right? You're creating something, then you're reviewing it, you're editing it. And whether or not that quiz it makes is what you want, and if you end up spending just as much time editing that as if you created it yourself, again, it might depend. But I think making sure that teachers have an option, because there's definitely some benefit. When we looked at one for our district, I immediately told my boss, Dr. McKenzie, yes, get it. And this is from somebody who likes making all my own materials, like very snobbish in that way, I will admit to it. But I said, you know, for teachers, they can spend more time on giving that individual essay feedback if you give them this other tool, and then they can decide to use that. But again, we chose one that we felt like had those guardrails in place, wasn't using or asking for any student data at all, and we have tried to train and encourage our teachers to use that. I think a big piece of that is also modeling and being explicit. I know, I think it was you, Becky, said you can't just have like an acceptable, not acceptable use. We're literally coming up with an acceptable, not acceptable use document at this time. Also, based on the College Board. So when you're talking about K through 12, students need things explicit. They need to know this is okay on this assignment and this is not okay on this assignment. And you can't have that gray. And you have to be able to model that. Here's how I'm using it. This is what I'm doing. Here's what I'm asking you to do, and going through that with them. And I feel like failure to do that is just setting them up to then use it inappropriately. So I think those things are all important. In terms of the essay idea, I'm in agreement that it should not be used to replace it. Although I will say, interestingly, as everyone was talking and I was thinking about it, and as a former English teacher, current principal, I just think that, you know, when I would assign something, you would give students examples of essay topics or research topics. And so how different is it when AI is doing that for you? I don't know. Obviously, the ideal is that a student is able to do that themselves, and some students need more scaffolding than others. So I think just like when you're regularly in the classroom, it's more complicated. I think that's what you were saying, Torrey, about like the specific context around it. I think, you know, how AI can be used as that scaffold is an important thing. So maybe the first goal is everybody does come up with their own topic. And then if you've got a group that's like, oh wow, it's 20 minutes and we haven't moved on, then either you could give them a list of your own ideas, or they could look them up on AI, and I'm not totally sure what the difference is between those two. So that's all.
Wow. So 2 years ago, I was getting ready to retire, when MIT and its affiliates called me and said, do you want to get involved in this nonprofit we're launching out at MIT that focuses on AI in education? And I only said to them one question: can I say what I want? And I think they were taken aback by that. And they're like, what do you mean? And I said, well, 15 years ago, we didn't regulate social media and cell phone use. And now we have rising rates of anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation, because kids are judging their self-worth based on how many likes they get on TikTok. Now that's an oversimplification, I understand that. But the research coming out about it is really bad. AI is this incredibly powerful tool, and I actually think it's going to kickstart the next revolution in education, particularly around the idea of differentiating and personalizing instruction. But there's a lot of bad things with it too. voice clones, deepfakes, bias, energy concerns, AI companions, like the list goes on and on. Cognitive offloading, right? I mean, there's just so many things that we need our kids to be AI literate. So this is like one of the first times I've been in a room where people are having these discussions. And what I talk about when I speak publicly about this is we need to talk about this intently and as a first step before we go on this Oklahoma land rush, which seems to be invading this country right now for AI. You know, I have 2 kids. How many of you have kids? How many of you want 2 more? Fewer. Okay, it's an open invitation. They like to tease me and they say, tell us again, Dad, when there was no internet and the phone was attached to the wall, there was no microwave, how did you eat? Right? I get that's an indictment for me as a parent. But the truth is, that was the first half of my life. And I actually think I'm better for it. Now, I learned the technology, I learned the internet, all that stuff. But we weren't prepared for the technology. We know already there are problems with AI. And so our organization is set up to teach kids to use this technology safely and productively. And I don't want to say we're against AI, I'm really just against tech bros who are trying to make money. Because I do think this, in the future economy, kids are going to need to know these skills. We used to talk about the 3 R's in education: reading, writing, arithmetic? It's a stretch. What I say now is it's 4 R's: reading, writing, arithmetic, and if you'll allow the stretch to continue, artificial intelligence. Because I don't think AI is going to replace people, but I think people with AI skills are going to replace those without AI skills. And in that world, our kids need to know how to use this safely and productively. As a side note, PISA is going to, for the first time in 2029, offer a discrete AI literacy test. PISA is the international test that tests 15-year-olds on various subjects. It's doing an AI literacy test. Right now, the way we're going, I can almost guarantee we're going to score number 30th in the world on the technology that I think most people would agree this country largely created. So how do we have those talks and discussions about this tool, which is really powerful? When my kids turned 16, I didn't just give them the keys to the car. I put them through driver's education, and I white-knuckled in the front seat with my kids as they learned to drive. AI is a more powerful tool than this, and yet we're just letting kids go for it, right? And so we need to have that supportive environment where in these conversations, to know where to draw the line. My children were born in Boston, raised in Boston, and live in Boston. They went to the Boston Public Schools. They can't write in cursive. Okay, they probably don't need to know that. Nobody ever told me they weren't going to learn cursive, but that's probably fine. My kids were born in Boston, raised in Boston, live in Boston, can't get anywhere in Boston without GPS, Waze, or another kind of device. I can get everywhere in Boston because I needed to know landmarks and street names back in the day. That's a spatial relationship skill that our kids have lost. Now I'm in these meetings with these techno people who are saying, kids don't need to learn to write anymore. I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Writing is thinking. You almost need to make sure that kids have a knowledge base first before you can let them use this technology, right, going forward. I have chat on my phone. I use different AIs, but I have chat on my phone, and I probably interact with it 7, 8 times a day. 2 or 3 times a day, I'm arguing with it because I know it's wrong. It's giving me bad information, and I know how to prompt. But what if kids just accept what they're given? And they turn to drones. I mean, this is the offloading part that we have to worry about. So these examples were really well done by your student. Very well done. Very good. Yes, we appreciate that. And I think these are the kind of conversations we need to have.
Hang on to that, and let's now turn to all of you. What questions do you have? What's on your minds? What do you want to ask or share at this point? We've got plenty of time to go through this. Yeah, please.
I'll preface this with, I'm old, I have very limited experience with AI. I talk with my kids about how they use it. But one of my concerns is it seems that that these tools don't foster creativity, and when we're using them to generate topics for projects, where's the next big idea going to come from if we're all using these generative artificial intelligence tools. Who's gonna think outside the box? Because it just feels like it's a box.
Thanks for that question.
Sure, I love
I mean, it's such an important question, right? Because one of the things that came out right when ChatGPT launched was this democratizing of creativity, right? And people says like, you know, we don't need to be creative anymore because AI can help us do that. It's the same thing with tools like, you know, Snapchat and TikTok and iMovie coming out and saying, you know, everyone can make media nowadays, right? And I find it really hard to think about because I do think these tools can inspire creative thinking. There's a lot of research studies that have shown that humans plus AI are more creative than teams of people without AI and individuals without AI. There's several studies showing that. It's really the humans plus the AI together that actually is more creative. But there was a more recent study that showed that AI is just about as creative as humans across the board in a lot of things, but the diversity of ideas that it comes up with was more narrow than what humans were able to come up with, right? And so you're getting at that exact point of, if we're turning to these tools for ideas and there's, you know, just kind of, they're coming up with a lot of ideas, but they're narrow ideas, are we limiting ourselves? And so that's where kind of this understanding of, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to automate? I like the terms automate and augment. I think that's the best. Automate, are you replacing your creative thinking? Then we're just handing it over to AI and letting them make the decision. I refer to my colleague, Dr. Bob Malloy, who likes to cite Seymour Papert. Way back in the day, are you letting the computer program the child or the child program the computer? In this case, are you letting AI decide your creative thinking for you, or are you using it to enhance or augment your creative thinking? And so, you know, it comes down to how it's being used, but again, you have to be super careful about, it might come up with a million ideas, but not at the diversity of what humans can come up with, and we never ever, across the board, never ever should replace humans with AI, just in any, I love seeing the Screen Actors Guild was like the first to say in their contract, you are not allowed to replace us with AI, because they were thinking about that level, that things that AI can do, and people saying, hey, we don't need humans to be creative anymore, we've got AI, and they're saying, no, we need to push back about that.
Oh, good. I'm sure lots of folks want to answer this, so maybe we'll take one more and then we're going to go question.
I think those things make sense. I think for me though, when we're thinking about coming up with ideas, when we're talking about students, I think that's what's helpful for me to remember, like what group are we talking about? I'd be curious with that study, how old they were, who that study was done on, right? Because students have to learn how to be creative first, and they have to learn how to exercise that creative muscle. And then maybe later, like I will admit, in my life, I get to be the social media director for our school because there's just not that many administrators, there's me. And so I'm not really that good at it, which might come as a shock to some people who know me, but it wouldn't. So I do ask AI to come up with all of my social media posts. I'm fine with people knowing that. That is not my skill set in particular, but it's really just not worth my time, right? Like we talked about efficiency earlier in this group, but I also spent many years learning how to be creative and do my own writing and come up with my own thoughts first. So I do think when we're talking about students, it's important to teach them how to struggle to come up with a good idea, right? So like I would agree, I think that's important, and we need to think about what group of people we're talking about. Have they mastered this base skill yet? And if so, then okay, maybe there's something that they can offload, and I can be like, I'm gonna focus my real thinking and idea of problem solving to, you know, coming up with this other thing, and I'm just gonna let AI write my social media posts, and I'm just gonna check it and say, sure, that sounds good, what do I know? And then I post it and people like it or they don't. So I think that's where I land on that piece. It's like, who are we talking about when we're saying that? And even, you know, here we're talking about K through 12 students or college students. There's still a difference there in those age groups and what they've done and mastered.
So, our Arnold Lane, PhD student social justice ed here. I have concerns and I have a question. So my concerns are, these are going to become threes very quickly. And I'm a young millennial, or I'm an aging millennial, so I'm a part of the generation where they said you couldn't use Wikipedia in high school, but we use Wikipedia in high school. And we know that students are using AI for different things, for different reasons, learning processes, it's just part of their generation. And we know that it's wrong at times. Like it spits out citations that don't exist, or it might produce dates that never happened, and students will take that as a gospel. So I work in higher education. How should we prepare for that reality? This is probably the first time, this is also like the first or second time I'm having a conversation like this, but a lot of you are in the K-12 system, you might be seeing things. Those students are going to be ours tomorrow, it feels like. And this reality isn't changing because we're sort of being forced down this AI rabbit hole. I've been watching Terminator 2 a lot lately too, it's like a whole other thing. How do we prepare for this reality? Like this is a tool that is new and it's fresh and it's all the rage and people are going to use it. People are using it at work, people are using it at school. What do we do? What are you thinking? What are the guidance counselors telling the admissions?
So I think getting people together, and it's going to be more than just educators and, right? Like I think the parents need to be involved in a way they have never been involved in before. We're actually doing something, we partnered with the National Superintendents Association, and they're bringing, a superintendent from every state is bringing 2 kids to MIT this summer. They're going to go, the superintendents are going to go through the training, the kids are going to go through a parallel experience at the Kennedy Institute, which is an exact replica of the US Senate, and they're going to draft a national AI student policy. Because we want to hear from the kids. If they're truly digital natives, I think we need to hear from them first and foremost. A lot of these kids have lived through social media and cell phones. And I have no idea what they're going to produce. But they're going to have a national policy long before the adults have a national policy. I think in a strange way, it might be smart to start with the kids.
We're going to give you all a minute. Oh, Torrey, you're going to take the bait on this one.
I'm just thinking about policy, right, and guidelines. We're, again, kind of at this point where, it's here. People are using it. But interestingly, I think there's a lot of misconceptions around how it's being used. I think there's a lot of fears of students are just cheating with it, right? And what I love to do is when my students come into class early, sometimes I sit down and I'm like, just tell me how you're using these tools. And I found 3 main reasons through these conversations over the last 2 years. The first is skincare. They go to Target and they find a product and they need help understanding the ingredient list. They take a photo of it, ask ChatGPT if it matches with their skincare routine, which I think is a legit way to break down a barrier to their learning. The other 2 reasons, one is to unlimited practice questions to prepare for an exam, and 3 is to break down a reading they're struggling with. And so again, it's about bringing student voice in, it's about having conversations with students. How are you using these tools? And bringing that into the classroom and having conversations. But what really, really, really needs to happen is every single teacher at every grade level needs to have an AI policy. Because we could have a national policy, we have an institutional policy. Here at UMass, our new policy of fall 2025 bans all AI use across the board without instructor approval. I don't think a lot of students or instructors realize that. And if they go to 4 or 5 different classes, and each of those classes, the instructor has a different perspective of what is allowed or what's not allowed, but doesn't tell them in the syllabus, they're left guessing, and if they guess wrong, it could be dire consequences. And so I just think yes, we need parents brought in the conversation, we need students brought in the conversation, but we need teachers to be really transparent. I have an AI syllabus policy that's 4 pages long. It's open access and people around the world have used it, but I don't stop there on big assignments. I also say, as a reminder, here's what's allowed, or for my final assignment, AI is not allowed, and I just bring those reminders in often because we just can't assume we've made a policy and students will follow it. That has really never worked. It's about those, here's a policy, let's remind them, let's talk through this policy, let's give the student feedback, let's keep remixing this policy. These tools are changing every 2 seconds. Now we have to change, I just added in AI browsers and AI agents that can just go through your whole online course and complete it for you with a simple prompt. So I had to add that into my rubric, but right, it's a living document that I have to keep reworking, and that's what we need from teachers, and that's a big ask because teachers are already doing too much.
There was a question here, and we're gonna go back to Noah, and then Josh, Richard, and that'll definitely be our final question if we get there.
Annie McKenzie, really, I gotta say, super, super proud superintendent, an employee, April, and the students there. I just leaned over and said, that's a Hopkins. That's a Hopkins. So thank you. Thank you to all of you. I am an optimist. I need to say that. I'm a big Steven Pinker, the world is getting better, and then I'm gonna go into, and here's what I worry about. So one of the things I worry about is I often fear that overall, not just with AI, that our technological capacity far outpaces our individual and collective ethical development. So I don't think we spend a lot of time talking about that in schools or in society. I'm not talking about religion, I'm not talking about personal morals, I'm talking about ethics and the study of ethics. And so I'm wondering if folks on the panel have any feelings or thoughts about that. And I also wonder, should we be giving an equal sense of weight and urgency to this discussion about ethics, particularly as it pertains to AI, or just in general? We talk often right now, graduation requirements, we're thinking about from the new, financial literacy, must have it. Okay, that's great, but never conversations about ethics. I mean, how does one know what I stand for, and why, and how I behave in accordance with those values? So I think it's particularly important with artificial intelligence. I'm just curious what panel members think.
Ooh, I love talking about ethics. You shouldn't let me have this microphone. Such an important topic, and I would actually put more weight to teaching AI ethics than AI. The term AI literacy includes AI ethics, but how to use AI, right? And I do think that's one of the best ways to bring AI into schools, even at younger levels, is AI ethics. What are the issues we need to think about? Across the country, people are showing up in town halls and saying, we don't want data centers in our backyard. Monterey just voted, the whole town was the first town out of Los Angeles to say, we are banning AI data centers from this entire community, and more are following suit. We need students who understand the ethical implications of these tools, the environmental impact, and say, I'm gonna take a stand for this. But we also need them to make an informed decision, right? And so I think it's kind of a mix. We need to teach them ethics, teach them about the biases, the hallucinations, and the made-up information, and the privacy issues, and how much data these tools collect on you, and what they do with that data, the psychosis issues, and the emotional manipulation. But I also do think they do need to learn how to use these tools, and then make an informed decision. Because honestly, I've had a couple students who say, I'm refusing to use AI in your class because of the environmental issues. And my class is like half AI because I teach the digital tools and apps class, and that's hard for me to grapple with, and I find flexible assignments, but I'm like, how will you prepare for a future as a teacher or whatever you're going to where AI companies are asking or forcing this upon you? You won't be able to make an informed decision about using these tools if you just stand your moral ground and never touch them. And so that's why I'm kind of like, you need both sides to learn how to use these tools, how to prompt, how to engage with them, but really think through the ethical issues and decide, hey, this is a time where I don't need to prompt it 30 times and waste the environmental impact of this, or maybe I don't need it for my math help. My older sister's great at math, I'll just go ask her and make these decisions of I worry about biases. Those are what we need to help all K-12 students. We talk about how we prepare K-12 students for the future. We need them to be able to make an informed decision about the use of these tools.
I would just add, and I think you're both very much right that this is important. I also think sometimes our discussion about AI and ethics puts a lot of burden on individuals that probably deflects a little bit from our friends, the tech bros. And I think there might be some value in kind of broadening what we think about when we think about AI and ethics and technology and ethics out to the larger data economy, data governance, how money flows through this process, how power works in the processes of proliferating these technologies, particularly in public education, because that's what we care about in this room. And letting people sit with kind of the broader, I don't even know if ethics is the word, but thinking about it at some other levels would also be important. We're all sitting with this very heavy burden of what do we do, including if I enter this chat, am I emptying out 10 gallons of water somewhere? That's a lot.
And I would just add that I'm working with some of the youngest learners, they're 8 and 3rd grade, and we're having these conversations at their level. So right now we're starting a new unit about water. My students are going to be making PSAs about different ways to save water. And one of the things that we are going to talk about is AI and how is it appropriate to use it, and what are the ethics of it? How can we use it but still think about the greater impact?
All right, we're gonna go one. Where are you, Josh? We're gonna go with Josh, and then we're gonna go have some snacks after that.
2 questions. One, thinking about the student using the AI to help with math. One thing that struck me was just the basic, does it work? Like, is that student learning that math or just learning the right answer? And I think about that both as a question about AI generally, but maybe for each tool, like we have to know for each application, for each student, is this effective and is it not effective? And that's an enormous amount of analysis, and then how would you get that into the hands of teachers to just know at a practical level what works? The other question I have goes beyond the scope of relations, what you think. I mean, it feels like AI will change the world. We kind of know that. Like 15 years from now, what people will need to do will be very different because of what AI does. What people need to know, what they need to know how to do, will be almost totally different work in their own lives and their civic life. When you think about education, how should the people we're educating now, the adults in that world, what is it that should we think differently about what students need to know? Not to be able to use AI, but to be able to do the things that AI can't do. Like, how would we think of what humans need to do in 15 years and how that should shape what education looks like now? Yes, simple.
I've already forgotten your first question, but for your second one, I guess I think a lot about spell check. And I don't know for sure, but I'm going to assume that in the past, there was a time where people were expected to know how to spell words for a lot longer all through school. And now in elementary school, they still have spelling tests, and they still have spelling bees and all of that, and they have to learn. But then eventually, they don't anymore, right? That stops, and they can just use spell check and everything's fine. And that's a very basic AI kind of tool, right? And so I think you're probably right. I think eventually, maybe those things will shift. Maybe there'll be something else. And maybe just like I use AI for social media posts, it'll be like, okay, in this class, you can use AI to write this thing. I don't know. Someone who likes, writing and reading, I hope not, but you're probably correct. What that's going to be, I honestly don't know. I think it's important to pay attention to so that we don't lose the thing that really matters. I would guess someone back in the day thought it really mattered that we all knew how to spell things, though. So I'm just not really sure where that's gonna end up.
So for me, that when we talk to teachers about this, we show them how it can make their life easier with some of the menial tasks. And my hope is that by taking that stuff off their plate, that they can get back to doing what they got into education for, building great, engaging, highly rigorous instructional content for kids, right? And so you can only do that, though, if you have a knowledge base to begin with. And so having the ability to free up time and space to share best practices, to collaborate with your peers, to think critically, there's an opportunity to do all that if we can take some of the more baseline stuff off of people's plates. But we have to decide where to draw the line. I was okay with giving up cursive. Maybe you're not. I was. But, to your point, like, I gave up on spell check. Thank God for spell check for me personally. But maybe you're not. And so we've got to have these discussions about where to draw these lines.
All right, we're going to go Josh, Richard, and I think we've got a call at that point.
So I started my Facebook account in 2007 when I was a high school freshman. Now I'm a high school assistant principal, and we're just now talking about banning cell phones, spell with L, and dealing with social media. And it seems like only now lawmakers and policymakers and people that can make decisions on these things are starting to wrap their So I wonder if there's a thought process around how lawmakers, policymakers should be thinking, talking, knowing, how can we, express these kinds of ideals to lawmakers so that they can also be part of that conversation. And I'm looking at our former commissioner.
I'm gonna take the thing and pass it to
so-
those people. I agree with you. Be awesome if DESE had slightly better policy and guidance for us. We created our own guidance last year. We're working on our own competency framework based on the DESE literacy module, on whatever they have. But honestly, there's not a lot of great stuff out there. So I'm with you. You want me to go this way next?
Yes.
One of the, I don't have the answers, I assure you. And anyone that tells you they're an AI expert, they don't have the answers either. What I would say is, this in some ways should be like a Sputnik moment for us as a nation to come together. I'd like to think that as polarized as a country we are, the one thing we can agree on is we care what's best for our kids. And if that's the case, and when we back up a step and say, I'm okay with capitalism, I believe it. But when it comes to kids, we need to have guardrails in place and regulations in place. And instead it seems like this has become a capitalistic, the next opening. I show a AI attention detection device when I speak about this publicly. And what it is basically is a camera that sits on a teacher's desk and tracks students' eye movements to see if they're paying attention. Do you think that's a good idea or a bad idea? I showed this to some kids at Medfield High. The kid said, "That's Orwellian." I said, "Well, thank your English teacher, first of all. That's brilliant." But we gotta draw the line on something. Just because we can do something doesn't mean we should do something. And kids can't if kids are really gonna go further faster, they've gotta have the knowledge base first. And it is true that we missed the boat on social media and cell phones. I'd like to think that people are starting to come together to think hey, we've seen all the problems with AI, and we need to get out ahead of it this time. But the draw of capitalism is omnipresent.
Richard, you want to take us out? I thought you had a question.
Yeah, I'll take it. So, my perspective is school committee. And by the way, side comment to you, I can remember when we got our first TV in 1950, talking about internet. I've been pushing, going back more than a dozen years from London strike, when got all these health problems, our teachers were prepared for that. They didn't like it, they had to work hard, but they were used to that. As a school district, I think there's great benefit, depth and breadth. Somebody wants to take French 4, 5, 6, somebody wants to take Arabic, advanced physics, whatever. I think that information is available. I think of the stuff Larry Rosenstock doing high-tech out in San Diego. But as a district, is there any prescription? I mean, we're having a great discussion. We're talking about ethics, we're talking about getting together and chatting. But is there any procedure of how, as a district, we can logically, sensibly, intelligently, educationally get into this? And it sounds like maybe you're doing some of this kind of work, or you're getting there, I don't know. But that's what really caused me to, when Jack said, we want to have this topic, would you be willing to, well, hell yeah. I think it's a great idea. But I also am hoping somewhere along the line we come up with some sort of prescription on how we can get into this.
So, many districts are making some really admirable attempts at this. Most recently, if you Google the New York City public schools AI guidelines, I think, they have a one-page website that does a really nice job at expressing their current understanding of how AI can and should be used in their schools and how it should never be and will not be. And it lays out all the questions that they are still grappling with. The system level responses, we're trying to do something similar right now in the Holyoke Public Schools and working with their task force. And I know that lots of colleagues on this panel and probably in the audience are doing that with lots of different schools to try to create a system level. I don't think it's a prescription, but I do think that it is some level of more fine-grained guidance than like Desi is able to give. Yes, a procedure of how we get together and have conversations just like this and sort of come to some shared understandings about what's acceptable in our unique contexts.
I've been doing a lot of trainings for school districts around New England and across the country, and thinking it through. And it's wild because I can actually tell how far along the district is based on what training they ask for. If they're asking for like academic integrity policies, they're pretty far behind. If they're asking how to teach with AI, they're pretty far advanced. And then there's the ones around ethics and just keeping up to date with these tools. You know, it's something that districts have so much to do to keep up with on top of AI. What I would love to see districts do is reach out to their local universities, to their experts in their area. We have a whole bunch of experts here at the College of Education who could work with local school districts and say, let's think through this because districts shouldn't have to figure this out themselves. Because my job is to try and keep on top of AI in education, and it's exhausting. And like no district should have to do that themselves, knowing that there's experts all around these districts, or even within the districts that can do that training, but it's an ongoing, evolving conversation that needs to happen. And that's just my thoughts on reach out to the support and keep working on it. It's the best thing we can do right now.
I am going to begin wrapping us up here, and the first stage of wrapping up is to give these folks a round. The second part of wrapping up is for us to give you a round of applause for being so engaged. And then the final thing that we need to do before we go out and see what awaits us out there is please use this QR code or that little URL to do the post-event poll, and that's where you're going to be able to share with us your thoughts about promising and perilous uses of AI in K-12 classrooms. You all now are experts. Maybe you were experts when you walked in, but if you weren't, you're experts now. And so we've got 50, 60 experts in this room who we can learn from. So if you just take a few minutes to do that, we would appreciate it. And then we'll slowly make our way out of here. And I think there are snacks out there for us. And if you had a question and you didn't get to ask it, then these 6 folks are going to be out there for at least a few minutes. And I'm sure that they'd be delighted to chat with you a bit. And of course, you also have an opportunity to chat with each other, because I think I saw some of you talking away during the event, and I have no doubt that there are lots of conversations to continue. So thank you for coming. We really appreciate it.